What's going on? I asked quietly, pulling off my headphones as I walked into the living room. My parents and my younger sister, Janet, were seated on the white couches. Janet had this pleading look on her face as she stared at them. The second I stepped in, all three of them turned to look at me. My heart started pounding. My mother glanced at Janet, then back at me. Her expression was cold. We're withdrawing you from school. Go freshen up. You're getting married to Elijah Martinez tonight. I frowned and confused. The words didn't make sense. What? What are you talking about? I looked back and forth between Janet, who had a strange, unreadable expression, and my parents. My father's jaw clenched. Do you think this is a joke, Hannah? Our company is days away from bankruptcy. The Martinez family agreed to help us, but only on one condition. One of our daughters has to marry their son. The room felt like it was spinning. I don't understand. Why me? Why now? Because Janet is too young, my mother said simply, as if that explained everything. She's only 18. She's still a child with her whole life ahead of her. But you, she paused, looking me up and down with barely concealed disappointment. You're older, more mature, and frankly, you don't have much going for you anyway. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step back. But I don't want to marry him either. I don't even know him. I tried to explain, my voice rising with panic. Don't be selfish, my father snapped, slamming his hand on the armrest. Your sister has a future, dreams. This is your chance to finally do something useful for this family instead of just taking up space. His words shattered something inside me. I always do everything for this family. I cook, I clean, I help with everything you ask, and you treat me like I'm nothing. Janet shifted uncomfortably on the couch, but her eyes held something cold. Hannah, please don't make this harder than it has to be. We're all making sacrifices here. What sacrifices are you making, Janet? I turned to her, desperate for some solidarity, some understanding. You get to stay here, finish school, live your life. I'm the one being sold off like property. Enough, my mother hissed, standing up. This discussion is over. You'll do this, Hannah. For once in your life, you'll be useful to this family. Before I could respond, my father's phone rang. He answered it, his face going from tense to completely pale in seconds. What happened? My mother asked, her voice rising with alarm. He stood up shakily, loosening his tie with trembling fingers. The investors they pulled out, all of them, without the Martinez deal, were finished. And just like that, he collapsed. The screams came from everywhere. Janet dropped to her knees beside him, wailing dramatically. My mother panicked and yelled for someone to call the doctor. I just stood there, frozen, watching my entire world spin out of control. Time moved strangely after that. Minutes felt like hours. The doctor came, checked my father's vitals, and administered medication to a heart attack. He said, stress-induced, he needed rest, and absolutely no more stress. I was still standing in the same spot, tears streaming down my face, when two of our security guards suddenly grabbed me by the arms. Wait, what are you doing? I tried to pull away, but their grips were iron tight. They dragged me toward the stairs. I kicked, screamed, fought with everything I had, but they didn't even slow down. This is what's best. My mother's voice floated up from below, cold and detached. You'll be saving your family, Hannah. Isn't that what you've always wanted? To finally matter? They threw me into my room, and I heard the lock click from the outside. I pounded on the door until my fists hurt, screaming until my voice went hoarse. Through the wood, I could hear Janet's voice, calm and measured. This is what she needs to do, Mom, for all of us. I know, sweetheart, my mother responded, her tone almost affectionate, the type of warmth she never used with me. You're such a good girl for understanding. I slid down the door, wrapping my arms around myself, and cried until there were no tears left. By the time the door opened again, the sun had started to set, painting my room in shades of orange and red. Two maids walked in without a word, not even a greeting, not a trace of sympathy in their eyes. They yanked my clothes off like I was a doll, something without feelings or dignity. I was too exhausted to fight. They dressed me in a pale, ivory dress that felt more like a burial shroud than a wedding gown. They applied makeup to my face with rough, uncaring hands. When they finally let me look in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. My eyes were red and swollen. My face was painted to hide the evidence of my tears, but it couldn't hide the emptiness in my eyes. I kept hoping this was a nightmare, that I'd wake up and everything would be normal again. Or, at least, as normal as my life ever was. They shoved me into a car, Janet's new car, the one my parents had bought her for her birthday last month. She stood by the driveway in her comfortable clothes, perfectly fine, waving at me with a small, satisfied smile. Like she was seeing me off on a vacation. The drive to the courthouse was silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. I kept thinking this had to be some kind of mistake, that someone would stop this. that my parents would come to their senses. But no one came. When we arrived, Elijah Martinez was already there, standing by the registrar. He looked like he'd come straight from work. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie was loose, and there was a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked distracted, tired, completely uninterested in what was about to happen. He glanced at me for barely a second before looking away. He didn't even really see me. "Let's get this over with," he muttered to the registrar, his voice low and bored. The smell of alcohol rolled off him in waves. The registrar looked uncomfortable but proceeded anyway. Signed the papers through a blur of tears. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. I was married. Just like that, and no one who loved me was there to support me. Not that anyone loved me. When we got to the Martinez estate that night, he was stumbling slightly, throwing off his jacket as he walked into the massive bedroom. He'd barely said 2 words to me the entire drive. When I glanced back outside, my family's driver and Janet's car were already gone. They'd left me here. Actually left me. The bedroom was enormous, decorated in dark, expensive furniture that felt cold and unwelcoming. Elijah locked the door behind us with a heavy click that made my heart race. I stood there awkwardly, unsure of what to do or say. My hands were trembling. He turned to look at me, his eyes unfocused and glassy. For a moment, he just stared, as if trying to remember who I was or why I was there. Then he moved toward me, and I instinctively took a step back. "Don't," he said quietly, reaching for me. His hands were large and surprisingly gentle as they found mine. "It's okay, you're nervous, did I understand?" For just a moment, a tiny, fragile moment, something like hope flickered in my chest. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe he was kind underneath the alcohol and the indifference. Maybe this marriage, as forced as it was, could become something real. Maybe someone could finally see me, choose me, want me. Maybe I could finally matter to someone. He pulled me closer, and I let him. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine a future where this man could love me, where I wasn't just a burden or a tool. His lips found mine, and I tried to respond, tried to feel something other than fear and sadness. But then he pulled back slightly, his breath hot against my ear, and whispered, "Janet." The name hit me like ice water. My eyes flew open. What? But he wasn't listening. His eyes were closed, lost in his own world, his own fantasy. "I knew you'd come around. Janet, I knew you wanted this too." Everything inside me froze. No, this couldn't be happening. "I'm not," I started to say, but he was already kissing me again, murmuring her name like a prayer. I tried to push him away, tried to make him understand, but he was so much stronger than me, and the alcohol had made him determined, insistent. "Stop," I whispered, but the word came out weak, broken. "Please, I'm not Janet, I'm Hannah." He wasn't listening. He'd never been listening. As he led me to the bed, still whispering her name, still believing I was my sister, I felt something inside me crack and then shatter completely. I realized with horrible, crushing clarity that my parents hadn't just arranged this marriage randomly. They'd known he wanted Janet, they'd known, and they'd sent me anyway because I was disposable, because I was the one they could sacrifice. And Janet had let them. She'd stood there, played the victim, and let them throw me to the wolves. That night, as he took everything from me while whispering another woman's name, while believing he was with the girl he actually wanted, I felt whatever small hope I'd been clinging to die inside me. It was never me. I was never the one anyone picked. I'd spent my whole life trying to be enough, trying to be seen, trying to matter. But I was losing my virginity to a man who didn't even know who I was, a man who wished I was someone else, my own sister. I stared at the ceiling in the darkness, tears sliding silently down my temples, and realized I had never felt more alone in my entire life. Hannah's POV. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of movement and immediately wanted to disappear. The memories of last night came flooding back, making my chest tighten and my eyes burn with unshed tears. I lay completely still, afraid that if I moved even slightly, I'd shatter into pieces. My body ached in ways I'd never experienced before, but that pain was nothing compared to the hollow feeling in my chest. I slowly pulled my hair up into a high ponytail, my hands shaking slightly. Elijah was already awake, standing near the window, shirtless. The morning light outlined his sculpted back, making him look like something from a magazine. His phone was in his hand, and from the way his shoulders were tense, he was clearly reading something that bothered him. He hadn't really seen me last night. Not through the haze of alcohol and his expectations. He'd thought I was Janet the entire time. Even while he touched me, even during the most intimate moments, he'd whispered her name over and over. Pulled my knees to my chest, wrapping my arms around them, trying to make myself as small as possible. Suddenly, his voice cut through the silence. "What the hell?" The words were loud, sharp, making me jump. My heart started racing all over again. He turned sharply, his eyes landing on me for the first time, and really looking at me. I watched his expression shift from confusion to recognition, then to complete shock, and finally to something that looked like disgust, mixed with anger. You, he said slowly, walking toward the bed like I'd just committed some unforgivable crime. Who are you? What are you doing in my bed? I forced myself to sit up straighter. Even though my body protested, I clutched the blanket to my chest, suddenly hyper-aware that he'd already seen everything. That he'd already taken everything. I'm Hannah, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Janet's older sister. I reached for the document on the side table, my fingers trembling so badly I almost dropped it. I held out the marriage certificate toward him. And your wife. He snatched the paper from my hand like it might burn him. His eyes scanned it once, twice, 3 times, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I watched his jaw clench and unclench, the muscle twitching with barely contained rage. You've got to be kidding me. I'm not, I said, my voice cracking slightly. I wanted to explain everything, the trap, my parents' manipulation, how I was dragged into this against my will. But would it even matter? No one ever listened when it came to me. Where is Janet? He demanded, his voice hard and cold. What the hell did you do? Before I could answer, before I could even process the accusation in his tone, there was a knock at the bedroom door. Elijah, a woman's voice called out, bright and excited. His mother, Mrs. Martinez. Elijah looked at me one more time, his eyes full of something I couldn't quite name, then turned and yanked the door open. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez stood there, dressed impeccably as if they'd stepped out of a photo shoot. Their faces were lit up with excitement, probably expecting to meet Janet, to welcome their new daughter-in-law. That excitement died the instant they saw me sitting on the bed, sheets wrinkled around me, tears barely dried on my cheeks, looking like exactly what I was, a girl who'd been used and discarded. Mrs. Martinez's smile froze, then melted into a frown. Oh, that's not who is she. She's Hannah, Elijah said, and the disgust in his voice was unmistakable. He didn't even try to hide it. The wrong bride. The words felt like a slap. The wrong bride, like I was a package that had been delivered to the wrong address. An inconvenience, a mistake. Mr. Martinez pushed past his son into the room, his eyes sharp and assessing. Where's Janet? What's going on here? I stood up on shaky legs, wrapping the blanket around myself tightly, and my throat felt like it was closing up, but I forced the words out. I'm her sister. There was a change in plans. The wedding went ahead with me instead. Mrs. Martinez's expression shifted from confused to suspicious, her lips pressed into a thin, hard line. A change? Without informing us? Without even a phone call? I didn't want this either, I said desperately, feeling tears prick at my eyes again. I was forced, I tried to tell them, but no one would listen, did I? Of course you were, she snapped, cutting me off with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. Forced to marry one of the richest bachelors in the country. Forced into a life of luxury. Do you think we're idiots? I didn't even know who he was until yesterday. I tried again, but my voice was too weak, too broken. You're manipulative, Mr. Martinez said coldly, his eyes raking over me with open contempt. That's what you are, a gold digger who saw an opportunity and took it. He turned to his son. Elijah, did you know about this switch? Elijah let out a bitter, humorless laugh. Does it look like I knew? I thought she was Janet. I was drunk. I was told everything was arranged, that she was waiting for me. I didn't look closely enough. The shame in his voice, the regret. It wasn't for hurting me. It was for being tricked, for sleeping with the wrong woman. I'll call the Jones family, Mrs. Martinez said, already pulling out her phone. This is absolutely outrageous, and I want answers, now. I didn't plan this, I said again, my voice cracking completely. Please, you have to believe me, save it. Elijah spat, his eyes cold as ice when they met mine. You played your part perfectly, congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted. My lips parted in shock. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted any of this? He looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. Didn't you? A quiet little nobody from a crumbling family suddenly becomes Mrs. Martinez overnight. You knew exactly what you were doing. You probably planned this whole thing. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the last tiny piece of hope I'd been holding on to. No, I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice suddenly was. I was locked in my room. I was dragged into a dress by maids who wouldn't even look at me. I was thrown into a car and driven here like cargo. I didn't choose this. I was never even seen or heard until someone needed a scapegoat, and that someone was me. It's always me. Mrs. Martinez's phone was already ringing. She put it on speaker, and my parents' voices filled the room. Hello, Mrs. Martinez. My mother's voice was dripping with false panic, false confusion. She was a better actress than I'd ever given her credit for. What is going on? Mrs. Martinez demanded. We have Hannah here, not Janet. Would you care to explain? Hannah? My mother gasped, and I could picture her clutching her chest dramatically. Oh my God, we didn't know. We thought Janet went with you. She's been missing since last night. Missing? Mr. Martinez's eyebrows shot up. Yes, my father's voice joined in, shaky and weak, probably playing up his heart attack for sympathy. We assumed she was at your mansion. She left in her car, but we thought. Everything went according to plan. Then Janet's voice came through the speaker, trembling and broken, every word perfectly calculated. It was Hannah. She tricked me. She locked me in my room and took my dress. She took my car. She said she'd always wanted what I had, and now she was going to take it. I felt my blood run cold. I actually laughed, a bitter, disbelieving sound that scraped my throat. She's lying. They're all lying. No one even looked at me. Their attention was glued to the phone. Please, Janet sobbed, and I could hear her sniffling dramatically. Please check the CCTV. She left me tied up in the trunk of my car. I was so scared. I've been here all night, terrified. She said she wanted to steal my wedding, that she deserved Elijah more than I did. The silence that followed was deafening. Elijah turned to me slowly, his eyes hard and accusing. Is that true? No, I said desperately. I didn't do any of that. Why would I? I didn't even know about this marriage until yesterday afternoon. But I could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe me. None of them did. Mr. Martinez held up a hand, silencing everyone. I don't want this drama in my house. You're getting divorced. This marriage will be annulled immediately. We'll arrange for Janet to come by, make sure she's all right, and then we'll handle this properly. My knees almost buckled. Divorced, annulled. Like last night had never happened, like I hadn't just given away something I could never get back. But then Elijah spoke, surprising everyone. No. What? His parents said in unison. We're already married, Elijah said, his voice cold and calculated. If we annul this immediately, the media will have a field day. The Martinez name will be dragged through every gossip column in the country. We'll look like fools. He paused, his jaw working. We'll stay married for 2 months, long enough for the public to lose interest. Then we'll quietly divorce, say it didn't work out, and oh scandal, and oh embarrassment. His mother looked like she wanted to argue, but then her expression shifted. She was thinking about the optics, the family reputation. Fine, she said tightly. 2 months, but she doesn't touch anything in this house. She doesn't attend any family functions. She's a ghost. I can live with that, Elijah said flatly, not even looking at me. His mother pressed her lips together, shaking her head. I can't deal with this right now. She turned and walked out. His father followed without another word. Elijah looked at me one last time before heading toward the door. There was nothing in his eyes. And oh sympathy, and oh curiosity, nothing. The door slammed shut behind him, and the sound echoed through the enormous room. I stood there, wrapped in a blanket, completely alone, and realized this was my life now. For the next 2 months, I would be the wrong bride, the unwanted wife, the girl nobody chose. Hannah's POV. A month later, the past few weeks had been some of the longest of my life. It felt like I was in a prison where no one even saw me, and Mrs. Martinez was the warden, who decided I was guilty before I'd even had a trial. I'd grown up feeling like I was never enough, always having to prove myself, always trying to earn love that never came. But here, it was so much worse. I felt invisible, unwanted, like a ghost haunting a house that would rather I just disappeared. The Martinez mansion was huge, spotless, and cold in every way that mattered. It was filled with beautiful things and empty of warmth. It turned out his parents didn't even live here. They had their own estate across the city. They'd only planned on staying a week to meet Janet, to welcome her into the family, to get to know the girl they thought their son had chosen. Instead, they got me. After my parents and Janet had lied about what happened, after the Martinez family had actually found Janet tied up in the trunk of her car, looking properly disheveled and traumatized from the CCTV footage, I knew it took everything in Elijah and his family not to throw me out on the street. I'd cried and tried to explain myself, but like always, no one was listening. My words didn't matter. They never had. A few days after his parents arrived, I gathered enough courage to come downstairs for breakfast. I wasn't even sure if I was allowed to be there, but I couldn't stay locked in my room forever. Elijah sat at the head of the long dining table, newspaper in one hand, coffee in the other. He was wearing a crisp suit, already dressed for work even though it was barely 7 in the morning. He didn't look up when I walked. In fact, he hadn't looked at me once since that morning after the wedding. His mother, Mrs. Martinez, was seated to his right. She set her teacup down delicately and gave me the briefest glance. You're not eating in your room today? I froze halfway to an empty chair. I thought it would be polite to join the family. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only cold amusement. How thoughtful. But you know what would have been truly polite? Marrying the right daughter, to begin with. My cheeks burned with shame. Mr. Martinez didn't even bother looking up from his own newspaper. I stood there for another awkward moment, then quietly turned and left the room. As I walked through the hallway, I could hear the maids whispering. They stopped talking the moment they saw me, but I'd heard enough. They all knew the story, or at least, the version they'd been told. How I'd schemed and manipulated and stolen my sister's place at the altar. How I'd locked poor, sweet Janet in a trunk and taken what was meant to be hers. None of them knew the truth. And none of them cared to find out. I spent most of my time in the guest room I'd been assigned. The master bedroom belonged to Elijah alone now, and I was grateful for that. Every time I saw that room, that bed, I felt sick to my stomach. The memories played on repeat in my head, and I couldn't make them stop. I stared out the window a lot, watching the world continue on outside these walls. Sometimes I imagined what it would be like to just walk out the front door. And keep walking, disappear, and start over somewhere no one knew my name or my family or the mess I'd been dragged into. But I had nowhere to go. No money of my OW, and friends who would take me in. I was completely trapped. After another week passed, I tried again to make myself useful. I found Mrs. Martinez in the sitting room and gathered all my courage. "Excuse me, Mrs. Martinez," I said quietly. "I was wondering, would it be okay if I helped around the house, maybe with the accounts or organizing things? I'm good with numbers, and I'd like to contribute somehow." She looked at me with genuine surprise, and then her expression shifted to disgust. "You want to touch our family's business now too? Isn't stealing my son enough?" "I didn't mean it like that," I said quickly, feeling my face heat up. "I just thought I am living here, and I wanted to help earn my keep." "You've done quite enough already, haven't you?" she said sharply. "Don't mistake breathing under our roof for being one of us. You have a few weeks left of this arrangement, and then you'll be gone. I suggest you use that time to stay out of everyone's way." I shrank back, mumbling an apology. I never brought it up again. That evening, after his parents had finally left to return to their own home, I found Elijah in the study. He was standing by the bookshelf with a glass of whiskey, flipping through what looked like a business file. I'd been building up the courage all day to try to talk to him. Explain. Make him understand that I wasn't who he thought I was. "Elijah," I said softly from the doorway. "Can we please talk?" He didn't look up. "There's nothing to talk about. I want to apologize," I said, stepping into the room. "Even though I didn't ask for the situation, I'm sorry that you're stuck with me. I know this isn't what you wanted. But if you just listen to my side of things," he cut me off, his voice sharp and cold. "Don't pretend like you're the victim here. Who tied your sister up and left her in a trunk? Your own blood? How desperate were you?" "I didn't do that," I whispered, feeling tears prick my eyes. "I swear to you I didn't. I didn't even know who you were until my parents told me I was marrying you." He let out a bitter laugh. "Right. Everyone's a victim until it's time to admit they enjoyed the rewards." "What rewards?" I asked, and I couldn't keep the hurt out of my voice. Being hated by everyone in this house? Sleeping with someone who thought I was someone else? Being treated like I'm invisible? You think I enjoy that?" He set his glass down with a sharp click and walked toward me. He wasn't threatening, but everything about him felt cold. Detached. Like he was looking at a stranger he had no interest in knowing. "You're here, aren't you?" he said flatly. "You're wearing the ring. You have the name. You stayed." "I have nowhere else to go," I whispered, blinking hard to keep the tears from falling. "My family doesn't want me back. I have no money. I have nothing. Do you think I'd be here if I had any other choice?" Something flickered across his face. Maybe doubt, maybe just annoyance. But then it was gone. "Then stay out of my way for the next month. That's all I ask." He walked past me, and the door slammed behind him with such force that I flinched. I sank into the nearby armchair and pressed my palms against my eyes. I wouldn't cry. Not here. Not anymore. What was the point? Tears didn't change anything. They never had. The days blurred together after that. Silent. Heavy. Bruising in ways that left no visible scars, but hollowed me out from the inside. It was quieter now that his parents were gone, which should have been a relief. But somehow it was worse. No one raised their voice at me anymore, but the cold indifference was just as painful. Every ignored greeting. Every time Elijah walked past me without even glancing in my direction. Every meal I ate alone while he worked late or went out with friends. I was completely, utterly alone. One night, about 4 weeks into the marriage, I was in my room reading when I heard Elijah's voice in the hallway. He was on the phone with someone. "Yeah, I'll meet you at the usual place," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. A genuine smile. The smile he'd never directed at me. "I need to get out of this house for a while. I'll be there in 20. I heard his bedroom door open, and carefully, quietly, I cracked my own door to peek out. He was getting ready to go out, putting on cologne, checking his reflection. He looked happy. Or, at least, happier than he ever looked when I was around. Then his door swung open fully, and he saw me standing there. His excited expression died immediately, replaced by a deep frown. He didn't say anything. He just walked past me like I was a piece of furniture. Be safe, I said quietly as he headed down the stairs. He didn't look back. Didn't acknowledge me at all. I closed my door and leaned against it, sliding down to the floor. This was my life, this cold, empty existence, and it was breaking me piece by piece. But then, a few days later, my phone rang and I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Hannah. It was Janet's voice, sweet and innocent as always. What do you want? Asked, my voice flat. I just wanted to check on you, she said, and I could practically hear the smile in her voice. I've been so worried. Are you okay? Is Elijah treating you well? I almost laughed. Why do you care? Because you're my sister, she said, and she actually sounded sincere. That was the worst part. She was such a good liar that even I sometimes doubted my own memories. I know we've had our differences, but I never wanted you to be unhappy. Then why did you do it? I asked quietly. Why did you let them send me in your place? There was a pause, then, in a voice so cold it made my blood freeze, she said, because I didn't want him, Hannah. Elijah Martinez might be rich, but everyone knows he's cold. Controlling. I have my whole life ahead of me. Why would I tie myself down to someone like that when I could have anyone? So you let them sacrifice me instead. You were always going to be the sacrifice, she said simply. That's just who you are in this family, the backup plan, the one we can afford to lose. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but it's the truth. Before I could respond, she hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time, her words echoing in my head. The one we can afford to lose. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Janet's call, about how easily she'd admitted that I meant nothing, that I'd always meant nothing. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was a photo of Elijah at a bar, sitting close to a beautiful woman. Too close. Her hand was on his arm, and he was smiling at her the way he never smiled at me. The next photo showed them laughing together, then another of them leaving together. There was no message attached, just the photos. Someone wanted me to know, someone wanted me to see that even in this sham of a marriage, I still meant nothing. I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. This was my life, and I didn't know how much more I could take. But the very next day, something shifted. Elijah's phone rang while he was in his study, and he put it on speaker while he worked. Elijah. It was Janet's voice, and she sounded upset. Elijah, please, I need to talk to you. I was passing by the study on my way to the kitchen when I heard her voice. I froze. Janet, Elijah said, and his voice was warm, concerned, everything it never was when he spoke to me. What's wrong? Are you okay? No, she sobbed. I'm not okay, but I can't stop thinking about what happened, about how Hannah ruined everything. That I was supposed to be her wife. Elijah, we were supposed to be together, but she took that from me. She took you from me. My hand flew to my mouth. She was lying. She just told me yesterday that she didn't want him. But here she was, playing the heartbroken victim. I know, Elijah said softly. I know this isn't what either of us wanted. I'm so scared, Janet continued, her voice trembling. Scared that you hate me. Scared that I'll never be able to face you again after what she did. I can't even imagine stepping foot in your home for months, maybe longer. Not while she's there. Not while she's pretending to be me. She's not pretending to be you, Elijah said, but his voice had gone hard, angry. But you're right. What she did was unforgivable. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burst in there and tell him the truth. But I knew it wouldn't matter. He'd already made up his mind about who I was. I have to go, Janet said, sniffling. This is too painful. Just please remember that I never wanted this, that it was her, not me. And then she hung up. I heard Elijah slam his fist down on his desk, muttering something I couldn't quite hear, but the anger in his voice was clear. I quickly walked away before he could catch me listening, and my heart was pounding, and I felt sick. Janet was playing games. She was making sure Elijah stayed angry at me, making sure he never gave me a chance to explain. She was keeping me trapped in this nightmare while she played the innocent victim. And there was nothing I could do about it. Later that evening, Elijah found me in the kitchen. I'd been spending more time there lately, teaching myself to bake. The cook, Mrs. Chung, was a kind older woman who didn't seem to judge me like everyone else. She'd been patient, showing me how to make cookies and cakes and pastries. It was the only time I felt remotely human. What are you doing? Elijah asked from the doorway. I jumped, nearly dropping the mixing bowl. Too was just baking. Mrs. Chung has been teaching me. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he noticed the bandage on my hand. What happened? He asked, his voice neutral. I burned myself yesterday, I said quietly. It's fine, just a small accident. He didn't say anything else, he just turned and left. But the next morning, when I came down to the kitchen, Mrs. Chung pulled me aside with a small smile. Mr. Martinez asked for chocolate cake last night, she said quietly. I told him you'd made one. He had me wrap a piece for him to take to work. My heart stuttered. Hey, ate the cake I made. Every crumb, she said, her eyes twinkling. And he asked if there was more. I felt something warm bloom in my chest. It was such a small thing, so insignificant in the grand scheme of everything, but it felt like maybe, just maybe, he'd seen me. Even for a moment. For the rest of that day, I couldn't stop smiling. But that night, everything changed. Hannah's POV. The days blurred into weeks. And I faded with them, that I stopped counting how long I'd been in the Martinez mansion. Same walls, same silence. Same cold shoulders. Nothing changed except me, that I was getting quieter, smaller. Like I was slowly disappearing. The only bright spot had been that one moment with the cake. After that, I'd made it a point to bake something every few days, leaving it in the kitchen for Elijah. He never thanked me, never acknowledged it, but Mrs. Chung would tell me quietly that he'd eaten whatever I made. It was pathetic, really. Clinging to such tiny crumbs of recognition. But it was all I had. I'd also started spending more time in the garden. The gardener, an elderly man named Thomas, had shown me how to tend to the roses and the herb garden. There was something peaceful about working with the soil, watching things grow. That it made me feel less useless, that I still hadn't spoken to Elijah properly since that day in the study, weeks ago now. He came home late every single night. I'd found myself sitting in the living room, reading books from his extensive library, waiting for him. I told myself I was just being a responsible wife, making sure he got home safely. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was lonely, desperately, achingly lonely. Sometimes he came home drunk. Sometimes he was just distant and cold. He never looked at me. He'd just walk past me and head straight to his room, usually with a bottle of something expensive in his hand. He was too handsome to be drinking himself into oblivion every night. But then again, maybe it was my fault. Maybe marrying me had driven him to it, though. He'd been drunk on our wedding night too, as oh maybe it wasn't all about me. One night, I found another note on the kitchen counter, scrawled in his sharp handwriting. Don't touch the wine in the cellar. It's not for you. I'd only had one glass of wine one evening while reading. He must have noticed. He noticed everything, apparently, except me. The isolation was getting to me. I'd started talking to myself while writing in a journal Mrs. Chung had given me. I was scared I was going crazy, scared that if I stayed in this house much longer, I'd lose whatever was left of myself. But then there were those small moments, like when I made him that chocolate cake and he'd actually eaten it, or when I burned my hand and he'd asked what happened, even if his voice had been flat and emotionless. Maybe he wasn't entirely made of stone. Maybe there was a part of him that could see me as something other than a scheming liar. Tonight, I was lying in bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. It was past midnight and Elijah still wasn't home. I'd given up waiting on the couch, and my body was tired from a day of gardening, my hands slightly dirty despite scrubbing them. The moonlight crept through the window, casting long shadows across the room. I imagined what it would be like to just vanish, to walk out the door and never look back. To find somewhere in the world where no one knew my name or my shame. But I had no money, and friends, and one who cared if I lived or died. Not even myself anymore. I must have fallen asleep at some point because I don't remember closing my eyes, but I definitely remember how I woke up. The door to my room slammed open. Hard. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet. I shot up in bed, my heart jumping into my throat. Elijah? I blinked, confused and disoriented. He stood in the doorway, swaying slightly. He was clearly drunk. His collar was open, his hair was messy, his eyes were unfocused and bloodshot. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me, breathing heavily. I thought you weren't coming home tonight, I said cautiously, pulling the blanket up to my chest. Something about the way he was looking at me made alarm bells ring in my head. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The click of the lock made my pulse spike. Elijah, I said carefully, my heart starting to race. Are you okay? He didn't answer. He just walked toward the bed with deliberate, unsteady steps, and then he was on me. I barely had time to process what was happening before his weight was pinning me down against the mattress. Stop. Wait. I gasped, panic flooding through my entire body. You're drunk. Please, you need to. He kissed me, harsh and without any warmth, without any tenderness. His hands were rough, grabbing at me like I was an object, not a person. I'm your wife, I whispered desperately, trembling beneath him. But not like. Please, not like this. He didn't hear me. Or he didn't care. I tried to push him away, but he was so much stronger than me. The smell of alcohol rolled off him in waves, and I realized with horrible clarity that he wasn't seeing me. Not really. He was lost in whatever demons were chasing him tonight. Please, I begged one more time, tears starting to stream down my face. Elijah, please stop. But he didn't stop. I went still. I stopped fighting. Because I realized something in that moment. Something that shattered whatever tiny piece of hope I'd been clinging to. He didn't see me. He never had. And he never would. I wasn't a person to him. I was just a body. A convenient outlet for his anger and frustration and whatever else he was feeling. I was the shadow of the girl he actually wanted. A mistake he was forced to live with. A punishment. I wasn't even someone he acknowledged as human. I was nothing. As he took what he wanted, as I lay there with tears sliding down into my hair, I heard him mutter something against my neck. I thought this was what you wanted, he said, his voice slurred and bitter. You're my wife, aren't you? I can do whatever I want with you. Isn't that what you schemed for? To be Mrs. Martinez? To have access to all of this? His words cut deeper than anything physical could. That's what she said, he continued, and even through his drunken haze, I could hear the pain in his voice. Janet said you'd do anything to keep this position. That you'd manipulate and lie and play the victim. And you. Know what? She was right, you're just like she said. Janet, even now, even in this moment, her shadow was here, poisoning everything. I whispered, but my voice was so broken, so small. It didn't matter. He wasn't listening, he'd never been listening. When he was finally done, he rolled off me and passed out almost immediately, one arm thrown over his face, his breathing deep and heavy. I lay there for a moment, completely still, feeling like my body wasn't my own anymore, like I'd left it entirely and was watching from somewhere far away. Slowly, carefully, I got up. My legs were shaking so badly, I could barely stand. I wrapped a robe around myself and walked to the bathroom on autopilot. I didn't plan on crying. I told myself weeks ago that I was done crying in this house. But when I caught my reflection in the mirror, I stopped breathing, not literally, but in every way that mattered. The hickey on my neck, the dried tears on my cheeks, the bruise forming on my arm where he'd grabbed me. My eyes, hollow and dead, I didn't recognize the girl looking back at me, and I cried for that girl. For Hannah, who'd once dreamed of being loved, who'd once hoped that someone, someday, would choose her, who'd believed that if she was just good enough, kind enough, useful enough, she might finally matter to someone. That girl was gone now. Whatever was left of her had died tonight. I slid down to the bathroom floor and hugged my knees to my chest, sobbing silently so I wouldn't wake him. I wouldn't have to see the disgust in his eyes when he woke up and realized what he'd done though. Knowing him, he probably wouldn't even remember, and if he did remember, he wouldn't care. Hours pass, or maybe just minutes. Time didn't feel real anymore. Eventually, the tears stopped. I was simply empty. I looked at myself in the mirror one more time. At the bruises and the broken expression and the girl who'd been slowly dying in this house for weeks, and I made a decision. Asterisk, 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 before the sun rose. I was already dressed. I moved quietly, carefully, grabbing a small bag from the closet. I didn't pack much, a few changes of clothes, my ID and passport, the little money I'd managed to stash away from the household allowance Elijah's assistant had been giving me for personal expenses, and his wallet, which he'd left on the dresser. I knew it was wrong. But he owed me something for what he'd taken from me. For what they'd all taken, I took whatever cash was inside, several $100s, and left the wallet itself behind. I walked down the marble stairs barefoot, carrying my small bag. The mansion was completely silent, and no one was awake. The staff wouldn't start arriving for at least another hour. Everything was still, quiet, peaceful almost, if you didn't know what kind of ghosts lived inside these walls. I paused at the entry table and looked down at my hand. The wedding ring caught the early morning light, glittering mockingly. I pulled it off and set it down on the polished wood surface. It made a small clicking sound that seemed to echo through the empty foyer. The ring didn't deserve to come with me, and I didn't deserve to wear it. Then I walked to the front door, my hand shaking as I turned the handle. It opened easily, and alarmed, and locks I couldn't open from the inside. I could just leave. So I did. I stepped out into the cool morning air, closing the door softly behind me, and started walking down the long driveway. And no one stopped me, and no one came running after me, and no one called my name. And that was how I knew, really truly knew, that I'd never been wanted here, not as a wife, not as a daughter, not even as a human being. I was just a mistake that everyone was relieved to forget. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I couldn't stay. If I stayed one more day in that house, I'd disappear completely. There'd be nothing left of me at all. I walked, and didn't look back. Hannah's POV, years later. Amelia Andrew. I called out, standing outside the car, and glancing at the time on my watch with an exasperated smile. We were supposed to have left in the private jet about 15 minutes ago, but raising two twins, a boy and a girl who were attached at the hip yet somehow still managed to find reasons to argue every single day, was definitely a full-time job. Mummy, we're ready, Amelia sang out, her voice bright and cheerful as she ran past me toward the car. Before I could tell her to slow down, Andrew followed right behind her, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. I let out a breath, shook my head with a smile, and stepped into the back seat of my black SUV after making sure they were buckled in. I waved goodbye to the house staff, who'd lined up to see us off. 7 years. It had been 7 years since I'd left that mansion with nothing but a small bag and a broken heart. The first 2 months after I'd left had been the hardest of my life. I'd found a tiny, dingy apartment in a neighborhood I could barely afford. I'd worked 3 jobs, waitressing, cleaning houses, anything I could find that paid cash and didn't ask too many questions. And then I discovered I was pregnant. I'd cried for 2 days straight when I saw those 2 pink lines. Not because I didn't want a baby, but because I had no idea how I was going to survive. I was barely making rent as it was. But then, 2 months after that, I'd found out I was having twins, and something had shifted inside me. These babies needed me. They were counting on me, and I'd be damned if I'd let them down the way everyone had let me down. So, I'd worked harder. I'd saved every penny. I'd taught myself writing and designing clothes through free online courses. Working late into the night after my shifts, I'd ghost run for people, taking any project I could get. And slowly, impossibly, I'd started to build something. By the time the twins were born, I had enough saved to take a few months off. I'd named them Amelia and Andrew. Names I'd always loved, names that meant strength and courage. When they were 6 months old, I'd made the biggest decision of my life. I'd packed up what little we had and moved to Friris, a city on the other side of the continent, about an 8-hour flight from where I'd started. I knew no one cared enough to look for me, but I loved how far away it was, how completely I could start over. In Friris, I'd met Lucas and we'd clicked immediately, not romantically, but as partners, friends. Over the next few years, we'd built something incredible together. I had my own fashion line that had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. Now, at 26, I was a CEO of my fashion company, a mother, a woman who'd built her own empire from nothing. And I was going back. How do you feel about going back? Lucas asked from across the aisle of the private jet once we'd boarded and were settling in. The kids had immediately run to him, shrieking, "Uncle Lucas," with pure joy. He was like family to us, the only family that mattered. I accepted a glass of champagne from the flight attendant and considered his question carefully. I have no idea, I admitted, watching the kids settle in with their iPads. But all I know is I need everyone to see that the old Hannah Jones no longer exists. Lucas nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. He knew my story. After making sure the kids were comfortable and engrossed in their movie, I stared out the window until exhaustion pulled me under. When I opened my eyes, the sky looked different, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. We'd landed. I unbuckled my seatbelt as the pilot announced our arrival. Kids jolted awake, immediately alert despite the long flight. "We're here," I said, half to myself, as if I still couldn't quite believe it. "Is this where you were born, Mummy?" Amelia asked, her small fingers curling into mine as we prepared to exit. "Yes, baby, this is home." The word felt strange on my tongue. Home. It didn't sting the way I thought it would. This place didn't have power over me anymore. Andrew leaned forward from his seat, his expression serious. "Is this where all the bad people are?" Lucas, who was gathering his tablet and briefcase, choked on a laugh. "Straight to the point, as always." I smiled gently, unbuckling Amelia and helping her stand. "Not all bad people, just people we left behind." "You mean people you didn't want to see again," Andrew corrected, narrowing his eyes in that way he did when he was being particularly perceptive. He was so smart, they both were, but Andrew was scary smart sometimes, seeing through things that most adults missed. "Exactly," I said, chuckling as I stood. The flight attendant opened the door, and warm air rushed in. The warm breeze rolled into the jet like a memory I'd tried hard to forget, but I was different now, stronger. I stepped onto the stairs, holding both my children's hands as we descended. "Welcome to Orica, ma'am." The airport officers greeted me, professional and courteous. One of them helped me down the last step. I smiled at them, genuinely. "Thank you." The private terminal gleamed exactly the way I remembered, polished floors, security guards with tight, professional smiles, tinted windows shielding the luxury cars waiting outside. Money had a way of making everything look the same. Lucas joined us as we walked toward the exit. "The house is ready. I told the head of staff to hold off on setting everything up until we arrived. You'll like it. It's quiet, private, beautiful. Everything you asked for." "Good," I murmured. I didn't come back to hide, but I'm not here to be on display either. He gave me a knowing look. "You mean you came back to be seen and heard, but on your own terms?" I couldn't help but smile. "Exactly." The SUV was cool and quiet as we climbed inside. As we drove through the city, memories started flooding back. Vacations with Janet and my parents when we were younger. I remembered one time when I was about 8, my parents had completely forgotten me at the airport. I'd been left crying and wandering around for over 5 hours before they'd finally realized I was missing and come back. They'd only had 2 kids. "How do you forget one of them? You okay?" Lucas asked from the front seat, watching me in the rear view mirror. I nodded, my hands resting gently on the children's laps. just remembering who I was the last time I left this place. Amelia peeked up at me, her eyes wide and concerned. Were you scared, Mummy? Yes, I said without hesitation. I'd always promised myself I'd be honest with my children. I was terrified. I'd been broke and completely alone, with no one to turn to, and discovering I was pregnant had felt like the final straw, the thing that would break me completely. But now I was loved, successful, and I had these 3 people with me, Lucas and my 2 beautiful children, who believed I could do anything. Andrew leaned against my arm, his small body warm and solid. But you came back. So that means you're not scared anymore, right? I thought about that for a moment. Was I scared? Of seeing Elijah again? Of facing my family? Of walking back into a world that had tried to destroy me? No, I wasn't scared at all, but I was ready. No, sweetheart, I said softly, stroking his hair. Now I'm ready. The car turned onto the highway, and the city began to wrap around us. Same skyline, same energy, same pulse. But I wasn't the same woman who'd run from here barefoot and broken 7 years ago. I was steady now. I wasn't looking for anyone's approval. I wasn't desperate to be seen or acknowledged. I wasn't here to beg for anything. I was here to take what was mine. To claim my place. To make sure that everyone who'd hurt me understood exactly what they'd lost. As the buildings rose higher around us, the clouds shifted, casting patterns of shadow and light across the city. I stared out the window, my voice low but certain as I spoke to Lucas. I need to talk to you about something, I said quietly, making sure the kids couldn't hear. Amelia had already fallen asleep again. She was always jet-lagged after long flights. What's on your mind? Lucas asked. I hesitated, then said what I'd been thinking about for months. I need to officially end my marriage, get the divorce finalized. It's been 7 years, but legally, I'm still married to him. Lucas nodded. I figured that was part of the plan. Yes. I paused, then added, and I need to be prepared for my family to find out I'm back, about the kids. Do you think they'll try to claim the children? Lucas asked carefully. Try to use them somehow? I felt my jaw tighten. They can try, but they won't succeed. What about Elijah? Lucas asked quietly. He's their father. Don't you think he has a right to know? I turned to look at my sleeping daughter, then at Andrew, who was absorbed in a game on his iPad. Children need love, Lucas. Not biology, not a name on a birth certificate, love. I spoke softly, but firmly. I grew up in a house with both parents and a sister, and I was still completely alone. I was unloved, unwanted, and treated like I was nothing. I won't let my children experience that. I won't let them be exposed to people who don't know how to love. That's fair, Lucas said. But what if he wants to be in their lives? What if your family pushes back? I looked out the window at the city passing by, the city where I'd been broken and discarded. Then they'll see exactly who I've become, I said quietly. I'm not the girl who left, and I'm not weak, and I'm not voiceless. I'm not someone they can push around or control or manipulate. I paused, and when I spoke again, my voice was steady and strong. I'm back, I whispered, more to myself than to Lucas. And they're all going to see that I'm not the girl who left. I'm someone they can't break anymore. Someone they can't ignore. And they're going to learn that the hard way.